Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Black Women Amplified, the podcast. Your host, Monica Wisdom Tyson, brings you downloadable conversations that matter to women around the globe. We discuss all things Black girl magic, amplify our voices, and transform our challenges into triumphs. Monica calls on her League of Extraordinary Women to push our boundaries, share their expertise, and stories of personal transformation. Welcome your host of Black Women Amplified, Monica Wisdom Tyson.
Hello, Black Women Amplified family. It is your girl, Monica Wisdom, and I'm excited that you're here with us today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have lots of new listeners, so I want to say a special welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us on the Black Women Amplified podcast. And sister girls, the 92%, shout out to the 92%. Y'all are holding it down, and y'all are holding me down, and I appreciate y'all. Make sure that you tell a friend and tell a friend, text the episode to a friend, because we're going to get into a serious conversation today called Storytelling is Resistance. And why do I feel it's important for us to tell our stories? I'll tell you in a minute. Listen, make sure that you visit our homepage, the www.blackwomenamplified.com, which is going to give you all the insides of what's going on within Black Women Amplified. And we have expanded. The school is open, honey. The Power Story Academy is open, and I am so excited. I'm working on our first mini course, and I have outlined so many different courses for podcasting, storytelling, all types of things. So I have lots of plans for the future, so make sure that you tap in. And you can also download our Unlock Your Story guide, and you can get that at www.blackwomenamplified.com/story. And that will, not only will you get our guide that talks about the importance of telling your story and the different ways to tell your story, but you also get on our email list, which is where you get a dose of inspiration every Friday with our newsletter, as well as news and information of all the things happening with Black Women Amplified. And I'm having conversation on the email list that I'm not having publicly on the podcast. You can also check out our blog on our website, as well as the merchandise store. So you can get your Black Women Amplified t-shirt and your Black Women Amplified hat, and you can join the army of Black Women Amplified. So please connect, get in touch, and keep supporting the podcast. Listen, before we get into the conversation of Storytelling is Resistance, I have to talk about one of the most dynamic storytellers of this generation. And ladies and the men who love us, I am talking about Mr. Kendrick Lamar. His Super Bowl performance was exquisite. Is that a word? Exquisite? Exquisite. I could not believe what I was watching. I knew it was going to be great because he always gives powerful presentations. But I've watched his long-form concerts on Amazon. So if you haven't seen his live concerts, I think there's a couple of them on Amazon Prime. I think we're boycotting Amazon, so maybe they're on YouTube. But everybody's getting boycotted right now, child. No black folk, no dollar. But and I've seen performances on like talk shows and things like that. And whether he's doing a minute or 13 minutes, he is telling a powerful story. And I'm not going to do a long commentary because there are so many think pieces and breakdowns and reviews and all the things of this, but I will just say he didn't win a Pulitzer Prize for nothing. But there is one thing that I noticed that many people might not have caught. There's the storyline with him and Drake. There's the storyline of him and his boys. There's a storyline of his journey as an artist. There's a storyline of speaking truth to power. There's a storyline of the importance of Black people in America. That flag is our flag too. So he reclaimed the flag in that moment. But during that was that I also saw, which I've seen a couple of people talk about, was the acknowledgement of the divine feminine and the power of women, because he showcased women in an extraordinary way during his performance. Every time that he went to contemplate something or he needed some guidance, he had women behind him. There were the women in the white, there were the women in the blue with the black and the blue hair, and then there were the women in the red who actually started off the whole show with him. They were in the corner. But unfortunately, the camera of the NFL camera never fully gets everything that's going on when they're broadcasting it. So you kind of have to go back and find the clips of people that were there so you could actually see different aspects of what was happening. And the red, the white, and the blue had so many different meanings throughout the performance. But the other thing that I caught was, because I've watched it like 1,000 times, was when the American flag scene and happened, and the men, they were all men, and that, well, I don't know, but all of the performers were around him, and then it opened up, then it closed back up, and then it split down the middle. And so everybody was talking about it was the divide of how this country is divided. Now I'm calling it segmented because it's more than just divided. It is segmented from the aspect of what the media tells us. But what I saw, I was about to go into a whole nother conversation, but let me stay focused. When it opened up, it came to me. I was like, oh, that is Moses parting the sea. Because I was trying to figure out what is the undercurrent of the story, because I know he's very spiritual and he has, and that's in everything that he does. In fact, I think the first or the second song, Reincarnate, was about a conversation with him and God. So I was like, oh, this is Moses' story leading his people to freedom. And everything after that clicked. I said, this is a Moses story. Everybody always tells the Jesus story, but very few people talk about the Moses story and the power of Moses of pulling people away from the debauchery and the idol worship and all the things, coming from the mountain. He descended from the top of the steps to the bottom of the steps. And then he went in quickly and gave the word. And then he was like, this is bigger than this music. And so anyway, if you're a Christian like I am, or you know the story of Moses, go back and watch it through that lens of the story of Moses leading his people to freedom. Brilliant. That kid, I hope he gets an award for that show. If not, I'm going to make one and I'm going to send it to him. I don't know what I'm going to make. Maybe I'll just send him one of my hats and say, hats off to you. But brilliant storytelling. And I can understand why a lot of people that were there didn't get it, because the way that it was shot, from the clips that I have seen, it was shot specifically for television. Normally people put together a performance for the people in the stadium and it's filmed. This was specifically put together for us to see as viewers, the 133 million people that watched it, as opposed to the people in the stadium, because it was not a continuous movement throughout. They went from scene to scene to scene. So I can understand people saying, well, I don't get it. But it was Kendrick Lamar and people were into it. You could hear the cheering, especially when the shade came towards Drake a couple of times. He just tickles me. I just love that he's able to do the beef, but also dip down deep into our story, into the rivers of the stories of Black people in America. It's beautiful. So that was a perfect way for me to talk about storytelling as a resistance. Black women have been rewriting history for generations, from spoken word to memoirs, and we've always used storytelling as a form of power. We tend to lead the charge into transforming this country, whether we're saving it or whether we're creating what it is. And it's through our lens that we see everything. And the uniqueness about Black women, people are always like, oh, we're all the same. I don't see color. The uniqueness of Black women is that for generations, the way that we have had to navigate life is unique to us, right? And many other women have come to this country, many other, Japanese women, Native American women are here. They also have a really interesting connection to this nation because of what has happened to them. But we are, I always tell people, we're not indigenous to this land, but we are definitely indigenous to the United States of America, because the United States of America didn't become a country until 1776. Prior to that, it was a colony that spread from all across North America throughout the Caribbean. So that's why when people say, well, I'm Caribbean, I'm like, we're cousins. We're all cousins. The diaspora were cousins, Caribbean, South Americans, because it was all the same transatlantic slave trade. It was the first wave, and then it was the triangle. And because of our labor that was for free 150 years prior to the forming of the United States of America, maybe if we had people in leadership who actually had roots in our country, they would know this, but we don't. Yeah, that was my shade. Hey, Elon. So I say all that to say, for 150 years prior to the forming United States of America, our free labor, the babies that our ancestors birthed, created a workforce, an enslaved workforce that was able to build enough money for the United States, the founding fathers, as they call them. They weren't the founding fathers for real. The founding fathers, as they call them, to accumulate enough wealth that they could be independent of England, of the rule of the monarchy. That was us, through rice and cotton and sugar and all the different plantations. And then they were able to move into industry, into the Gilded Age, which is where they want to take us back to, where there's still a peasant class. So all of that is our story, right? But they continue to erase it as if we were not here. We didn't do anything. We didn't invent everything. We didn't send people to the moon. Like, we had nothing to do with that. And you know who really didn't have anything to do with that? That real president that purchased his okay, I'll be quiet. I'll be quiet. Shh. Shh. That person that purchased that position he's into now. You know who doesn't have roots here? Him. So I tell people, when people like, go back home, like, my family's been here for about 10 generations. And we've got about 5 generations living now. Maybe 4 now, but we have quite a few generations that are here, and we go back quite a few generations. So I know that my family is rooted here in the United States of America, even though our origins might have well, not might, but from other places, not just Africa, but, the slave owner's blood is within us too, as well as other groups of people. But I digress. My point is that we as Black women are the story of America. I always tell people, Lady Liberty, she's a Black woman. The Lady Liberty was a gift to France to honor us, the enslaved women, because they know what we went through to build this country and across the world. Enslavement was here, but everybody made money off of our free labor. So when people talk about reparations, I'm like, give me my inheritance. I want my inheritance from France, from Portugal, from England, Germany, everywhere. Whoever, Arabs, all of them. Run me my money. But anyway, but here's the thing. Let me get serious. It's late, so this is going to be off the. I'm telling you now, this podcast episode is going to be off the chain, because I have been trying to record this for 3 hours and I cannot get it together. But I'm getting it together because Thursday is podcast day and I want to make sure that you have something special to eat on for the weekend, just nourishment for your soul. And when I was thinking and contemplating what to talk about tonight, I really felt that I thought about when Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high, although she has changed that. She should have changed it a while ago.
Let's take a quick break.
Hello, everyone. Monica Wisdom here. I am the host and the producer of the Black Women Amplified podcast. But what you might not know is that I'm also a consultant for women entrepreneurs. I help women entrepreneurs develop their ideas, their brand, and their overall business strategy. Are you developing a groundbreaking idea or have a wealth of knowledge that could impact the world but unsure where to go next? Business is good, but you're ready for it to be great. With countless ideas racing through your mind, it's challenging to figure out what's next. I understand. You have excelled with top companies, but entrepreneurship feels like a new language. The truth is, you can do this. You've achieved great success for others, and now it's time to achieve it for yourself. At Monica Wisdom Consulting, we focus on your vision and crafting a clear, concise, strategic plan. Your dreams are within reach. You simply need a powerful roadmap to get you there. Are you ready to take the next step? Book a call and let's discuss your vision and future. You can reach me at www.monicawisdomhq.com.
But when they try and silence us, I say we get louder. And the way that we get louder in this era is not through marching. It's not through the normal form of resistance that we have done over and over and over again. It's about us getting louder as Black people. And I don't mean Black excellence. I mean telling our stories. Because as they're trying to delete us and erase us and act like we were never here, as the apartheid is trying to act like that we had nothing to do with this country, we have to write down our stories. They are shutting down libraries. They are going to destroy archives. The things that they are doing is really, really beyond what anybody can see because there's so much chaos. But when I take a step back, I say, okay, I get this. This is pure eugenics. They're rewriting the story so that the only winners, the only story that is being told is going to be a story of lies, and it's not going to include anybody else but white men. So what does that mean? That means that if they're going to tell their story, then we got to tell ours. If they're going to rewrite the story, we have to tell the truth. And we have to tell it and tell it and tell it. And I think, we have always had a history of storytelling within the Black community through oral traditions and social media movements don't really capture the full breadth of our story. It captures a moment of what's happening now. And I love how the kids are putting together these 3-minute vignettes about Black history. But it's really not enough time to tell the story. And we don't have to tell the story of James Baldwin and Maya Angelou. Those stories are there. I'm talking about tell your story. Tell your story about what it was like getting into college. What was high school like? What was, trying to get your first job? What was it? All of your challenges and all of your triumphs, all of your accolades. Some of us, we get awards, and some of us get recognized for the work that we have done. But many of us are on the sidelines, and people don't get to hear it until maybe somebody tells our story after we're gone. I think about my cousin Alice, and I even think about the elders in my family now who have lived these remarkable lives because in my mind, they're pioneers. because many of them were the first to do what they did. And truthfully, after the Civil Rights Movement, everybody was, we're all pioneers. It was all the first, Gen X and baby boomers, the silent generation. They were the first to do it. And so we are truly pioneers. And those stories have to be told. There's so many stories that haven't been told. There's so many books to be written. There's so many archives to create. And it's more important than ever that we as a community not recognize the community, but just simply ourselves. Just do it in the space that you're in. And why is this important? Because controlling our narrative is an act of defiance and power. Because we are not going to succumb to the narrative that they share, right? I've been reading, and it's forever. It is the longest book, I think. I think it's the longest book I've ever read is Barack Obama's latest book. And Michelle said it's just volume 1. I'm like, I can't get through volume 1. He's got another one coming. But when I tell you he read it, listen to the audiobook. Go get it from the if you get a library card, you know how I tell y'all to get a library card, but you can get audiobooks for free with the app called Libby, but you need your library card. I need to go renew mine. But we are snowed in, child. But and then you can just listen to it and he's reading it, and it's fun because he's telling his own story. So you're getting to hear all the bits and pieces of behind the scenes stuff of we might have saw the glimpse, but he's telling the backstory of different situations. And it's important that we tell our own backstory. That I tell my story. When I started this podcast, the first season was about me telling my story. My time in Paris, my time in South Africa, different stories, because I looked at my godchild's daughter and was like, man, and this was during COVID. I said, man, if I pass away during COVID, she's not going to know me because she's only 2 or 3 months old. Maybe she was 6 months old at the time. I said, but she's not going to know me. So let me put my stories down somewhere so that my goddaughter has an opportunity to say, hey, this was your auntie. This is the woman who was around me when I was your age and when I was a baby and when I was growing up. And she means a lot to me. So I want you to hear her story. So I put them in this podcast. It's season 1. And then when I moved into season 2, I started telling other people's stories. And so around this time, I think it's important for me to encourage each of you to tell your story. Do you have to write a book? Absolutely not. But you can get a pen and a piece of paper and write down essays and vignettes of your life. Of what's going on now, of important times. You can get a notebook and write it down. You can get a journal and write it down, just so it's archived somewhere. Because I think about this situation with them erasing us. I'm a movie person, so it takes me back to the movie Book of Eli, and how they had wiped out all of the Bibles, and there was one Bible left, and it was written in Braille, and so everybody was chasing Eli because they wanted the last book that was available of the Bible, and it was written in Braille, and nobody knew he was blind. And I think about that often because when I hear about them banning books and because of a person's sexuality or a person's nationality or a person's place of origin, and the reasons that they say that they are getting rid of people, even if I've interviewed many people who are first generation people, and I feel honored that they shared their immigrant stories with me. I interviewed somebody who's from, her people are from Puerto Rico. And when she moved here, she didn't speak English. And she's an Afro-Latina. So I've never heard an Afro-Latina experience of coming here as an immigrant and didn't know how to speak English. So there's many stories on this podcast, and I will record many more. I'm being very careful on who I put in here because it's not a place that, there's plenty of place where you can sell your programs and all the things. But this is really about telling people's stories. And it's important that I encourage each of you to find a place to tell your story. Whether it's during your speeches, whether it's during your presentation, every audience you get in front of, tell your story. If it's at a job interview, tell your employer your story. Let me tell you my story. Because stories build connection, stories build trust. And there's something, it makes people remember you. It's like I can remember somebody by their story more than I can by their name. And so find practical ways to document and share your story, and share it as often as you can. I've been doing podcast interviews. I have this, I'm opening up this virtual school, this virtual academy, and I have journals to sell. I'm selling my wares, but what I'm selling, I'm not selling, these are tools, but what I'm going on these podcasts and doing, and people are asking me these questions, that I'm making sure that my story is out there. So every podcast I go on, I tell a piece of my story. Whether it's the story of my childhood, whether it's the story of my trauma, whether it's the story of why I started Black Women Amplified. So if I'm not here tomorrow, somebody can find me talking about Black Women Amplified and why I started this platform, why I started Black Women Amplified, and why I continue to do it. It's not a place that it has yet to make me a millionaire, but I'm very passionate about what I'm doing, and I'm very honored that women are sharing their stories with me. And I'm very honored that I am able to move into a space of helping each of you tell your story. Not only just tell it, but transform it. Because I believe that our story is a place where we can heal ourselves. A lot of people say go to therapy. That's great. But for Black women, it's a bit of a challenge. And here's why. There's not enough Black therapists. There's not enough studies that study our psyche specifically as Black women. And if you don't find somebody who does other type of work besides just therapy work, something that's connected to the earth, it's not bringing the healing in the way that I think it. This is my opinion. I'll say allegedly, blah, blah, blah. But for Black women, we are so steeped in so many different forms of toxicity and trauma that the medical community doesn't even know. The closest thing that I have found of any type of studying is the study of veterans. The study of veterans when they study post-traumatic stress disorder. That is the closest thing to our experience as Black women in America. Going to war, literally going to war. I did an interview the other day. The other day, this week, with a woman, I can't remember, her name is Dr. Nicole, she's a therapist, and she graciously had me on her show, and we were talking about, she asked me a lot of questions about Black women because I've been working with Black women for the entirety of my career. All of my careers, I've worked with Black women, so I understand, in a lot of different ways, not just personal development for myself, but in different ways, having conversations and doing work and coaching Black women for many years. And it was interesting because when we talked about, she asked me why stories were so important. I said, I think our story is our key to our healing. I said, I find in talk therapy, people continue to talk about the problem, but we have to get to the genesis of the problem. And the genesis of the problem is inside of our story. And I've been through therapy. It's just my personal thing. It didn't work for me. But I did go at a time when I did not have a Black therapist and I did not know about anything about trauma-informed therapy. So I went on my own self-discovery journey to recalibrate my story. So because I knew I didn't want to be the person that I was, I knew I needed to be somebody that God called me to be. I needed to be that person. And I needed to be that person out loud. So that's what I'm talking about, transforming our stories. Hold on, I have to get some water. Oh, thank you. But I think it's important that we as Black women are conscious of, as much as we're trying to build a legacy, I feel at this time and everything that's happening, it's more important that we tell our story. And I'm not talking about don't get your money up and don't do all the things, but it's important that we sit down. Excuse me. It's important that we sit down and write down who we are, our experiences, our challenges, our triumphs. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be an epic novel. It could simply be a series of stories. A great way to tell them is in a series of short stories. It could be your lineage story. It could be your accomplishment story. There's so many ways to tell a story. And if you download the Unlock Your Story guide at www.blackwomenamplified.com/story, I talk about 5 different ways to tell your story. Excuse me. Told y'all it was late and this is going to be a wreck. But so you're going to get all the coughing. I'm not editing anything out. This is just me and you having a conversation. It's important. And the reason that it's important, because when I look at everything that's going on, we have fought so hard. Our elders fought so hard for us to have a different life. And there's so many elements out there. I'm calling them elements, but they're people. I don't even know. I'm not even going to call them people. Elements out there that are trying to rewrite and erase us. And I keep saying that because I want you to hear this. They are trying to rewrite and erase us. So our form of resistance is to get louder with who we are, what we've accomplished, and all the things. They want to ensure that there will never be another Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. They want to ensure that there'll never be a Colin Powell or even a Condoleezza Rice. They want to ensure that nobody that looks like us for generations to come will have the opportunities that we had. But there is not a group of people who've been able to accomplish the things that we have in 60 years. The Civil Rights Act was passed only 60 years ago. There are people still alive that were born into Jim Crow, that came out of Jim Crow and had full, glorious lives. But we don't know their stories. Your aunties, your uncles, your grandparents. You know, everybody wants to do the latest TikTok dance. Everybody wants to, have that viral moment. But I encourage you to have the moment where you sit down with that camera and ask Grandma, what was it like when you were 13? Tell me that story. What was the first time you fell in love? How did it feel when Ruby Bridges went to that school? Were you around? Do you remember going from segregation to integration? Were you a part of the Great Migration? Those questions. Those are the questions that we need to ask our family. My uncle just told me, and he hates for me to talk about him publicly, but he just told us the story. He put up a picture of the house he grew up in. And it was it was a one-room house, and it had an upstairs and a downstairs. And he told us the story. And we were all so emotional listening to him tell this story, because it was so powerful, because of the arc of his life. That he went from this one-room house in this small town to becoming a dean at a major university. And an award-winning dean at that. And my aunt, her story. And just the beauty of our family, and we're so focused on James Baldwin and Maya Angelou and all the things, and that's great. But we also have these great stories in our families that need to be told. So somebody has got to tell those stories. So I'm charging you with that. And even, it doesn't have to be this big arc of you went from this to this. It can be you took one step. Because for Black people, one step is a miracle. With everything pushing against us, one step is a miracle. So I invite you to just pick one part of your story that you've never quite wanted to share, that you've been hesitant about sharing. And I want you to write it down. Just write that one story down. And then maybe in a couple of days, something else comes up. And then maybe you put a notebook in your purse. Instead of hopping on social media to scroll during a break, you'll pull out a pen and a piece of paper. And you'll write, the story of when you had an argument with that professor and how it made you feel and what you learned from it and how it impacts you now. Or that one person that talked so bad that you became rebellious and that rebellion led your life to become miraculous. Because the best revenge is to do well. I don't know, whatever it is, I encourage you to stay within that space of the 92%. Here's the thing, people think the 92% we're chilling. We're telling the world we're chilling, but we're really all working on ourselves. We're resting, but our form of resting is healing. Because that election was a lot, and it was very hurtful that the country voted again, lied. They said they were voting with us and they did not. So we believed them. So our feelings we were mad about, just verklempt, I'll say, about that. But the other piece of it is, it's like, even with all of this, it didn't matter. With all the work that we have done, with all the marching that we've done, it didn't matter. So why continue to allow them to use our energy when they fully rejected us? So this one was personal. Because a lot of people don't know, but Kamala's candidacy was 4 years in the making. It didn't just happen. It wasn't just about the 3 months that she ran for president. This was 4 years in the making of people fighting for her to become the candidate if the opportunity presented itself. 4 years in the making because Black women told Joe Biden, your vice president is going to be a Black woman because we have fought with you and we got you this candidacy. So now you owe us. And those 4 months that Kamala did, I did a bunch of episodes about her during the campaign, but there's been no other candidate ever that has run a campaign like she did, and especially in the time frame of 89 days. She raised $97 million in 1 day. She raised almost $1.5 billion in 3 months. The things that happened, the miracles that happened during her campaign never happened before, even with Barack Obama. So I say all that to say, I charge you to just take one part of your story, one that you don't tell people, and just write it down. The beginning, the middle, the end, and the lesson. Because at this stage of the game, a part of our healing is to tell our story. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Black Women Amplified podcast. Story is resistance. How Black women have always reclaimed the narrative. So right now we're gonna what did Maxine Waters say? We're reclaiming our time. Don't forget to visit www.blackwomenamplified.com in www.blackwomenamplified.com/story to get your Unlock the Story guide. And if you feel so inclined, please go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast because it helps to get the word out. The more. All are welcome. All are welcome to hear the story and the perspectives of Black women. I will talk to you all next week. Have a beautiful weekend. And remember, your story matters. Sending you light and love. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Black Women Amplified. We hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to subscribe and log on to blackwomenamplified.com for more information. Keep shining.